Thank you for tuning in to Radicards.com, the Radicards podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Greeno, and we have Ryan Daly joining us again. And we're going to be talking about some updates in baseball that happened over the last week. And let's just get right into it here. Number one.
All right, man.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Ryan. Appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
Yeah, of course. Number one, Ronald Acuna, as you might remember, he got hurt. He got injured running across first base. He twisted his knee and hurt his back. So he's actually scheduled to work out at Braves spring training camp in Orlando, Florida. After that, he will begin a rehab assignment prior to joining the club again. So it looks like he's going to be okay. And I'm actually really happy to see that, hear that, because I know it's scary to see guys' knees go out or whatever. And the footage was actually quite scary. So I was actually really pleased with how quickly it looks like he'll be returning to the club.
Yeah, it's definitely encouraging. And for the sake of the game and the sake of the hobby and for the sake of those poor Braves fans, I mean, get back as soon as you can.
Right.
The injury looked really freaky, and I'm sure it freaked out a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But it's looking like it's maybe not as bad as people were letting on. Mm-hmm. It's good news, and hope the best for him.
Yeah, truly. And I know that some of the investors are going to be happy about hearing that he's going to be returning to the club sooner than later. So good stuff, man. I'm glad that that's happening. We'll be able to see some more of him before the season's out. So moving on, Bryce Harper is up for free agency in 2019. So he's expensive. He's a performer. Oof. He's very expensive. So interested teams will they'll have to fork over some serious cash to get him, which means the market that will be smaller for guaranteed interest. He's struggled a bit this season, but currently leads the Nationals with 19 home runs. And as a franchise face of the franchise player, teams that need a guy like that will probably be more in the running than those teams that don't. So, for example, the Yankees have Giancarlo Stanton on a huge contract he just picked up with the Yankees, 13-year.
Right.
It's $13-year, $325 million. And they already have Aaron Judge. So they already have their franchise players.
Yep.
Even though they have the deepest pockets right in the market.
Sure.
There's no wrong answer here. It's nice. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up going in 2019 and if there's going to be support built around him. And that's going to be a huge factor in whether or not he goes and joins a team, right? So,
yeah. I think the sleepers in this potential deal in the off season, because he's a Vegas guy. Obviously, Las Vegas does not have a baseball team yet. Mm-hmm. I would think that Arizona and the Colorado Rockies would be in the mix just because they have money to throw around. They're both considered hitters' ballparks, especially in Colorado. We all know that the ball just sort of flies out of there when you're at 5,000 feet in the air. And I just from my observations of him on Twitter and him in the media, it seems like he wants to sort of head back west, where he's from. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Rockies or the Diamondbacks make a big move for him. And Stanton has sort of set the floor, I guess, for these huge free market acquisitions. So
right.
$325 million for Stanton. Kershaw got $300 million, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. So that's about the figure you're looking at for a guy like Bryce Harper. I think you could critique his offensive numbers a lot. He's not really a guy that hits for average. He hits a ton for power. He hits, 30, 40 home runs every year. Mm-hmm. But like you said, he's a face of the franchise kind of guy. Like if you picture a face of the franchise type player, it doesn't really get much better than Bryce Harper.
Yeah, he's great.
You know, he's young, he's charismatic, he's got great hair, he's, you know, he hits the long ball. It's like he checks all these boxes. And I feel like for a team like Arizona and Colorado, they don't necessarily have that guy right now.
Mm-hmm.
So from a marketing point of view, I think it makes a lot of sense for those teams to really go after him. And like I said, he's from Las Vegas. He sort of knows that like that sort of mountain time corridor. I don't know what to call it, like the Four Corners area of the states.
Yeah.
And you know, I really hope he doesn't go to the Yankees. That would be such a boring storyline to see play out, or the Red Sox, or any like the Dodgers. Like, come on,
Right.
let's see him go to like a team and really like lift them up out of, you know, like a World Series drought. Let's see the Rockies win a World Series, or let's see the Diamondbacks win a World Series with Bryce Harper,
Or the Pirates.
or the Pirates.
Because they just drafted out their who was their star that they had? Andrew McCutchen. So
yeah, they traded him away.
Yeah, they don't have like a guy, and you know Garrett Cole's now with the Astros, so you know they could use a guy like. But does Bryce Harper really want to spend time in Pittsburgh? You know, what if he went to the Angels? You know, like with Mike Trout. You know, I mean, these are other things I think about. Like if he wants to stay in the West, you know, why not the Angels? I mean, the Angels deserve some World Series time at some point.
Oh, there are a lot of teams that are deserving of Harper's talent and of his namesake. So it's certainly going to be interesting. Also considering last year's off season, which we saw a lot of major league general managers sort of being stingy, for lack of a better word, with their big contracts. I mean, Jake Arrieta didn't get a contract until I think spring training started. I mean, there was a lot of holdouts on both sides for the big free agents. So the money wasn't just doled out very easily.
Right.
So I'm curious to see what the GMs do with the Harper kind of guy. Same with Manny Machado, who's also a free agent in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be very interesting to see what sort of contract they get, if it's going to be way overvalued or if it's going to be sort of undervalued, what team gives it. I mean, it's going to be fun to watch.
Whatever happens, I hope that he's continues to remain successful and continues to have a following, because I know when key players get traded, I feel like some of their following just falls off. I mean, look at the King Griffey Jr. market when 2000 he was traded to the Cincinnati Reds. Like, I mean, not only did fans in the stadium in like Seattle, you know, resent that, but the hobby, people stopped collecting Griffey after 99. They were like, well, if he's not featured in Mariners outfit, I don't care. I've seen that.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's no wrong answer here. It's just that, you know, I always feel like if you're collecting a guy, you know, you should embrace his career. Like you should embrace where he goes. You should enjoy, you know, and root for him wherever he is. And this it's kind of new to me when someone says, I don't collect him if he's in a certain uniform. It's very new. It's like a novel thing for me to digest, because as a Frank Thomas collector myself, when he went to the Blue Jays and A's, you know, shuffled back and forth at the end of his career, I didn't really care. I thought it was kind of cool to see him in a different uniform. You know, it's kind of like, oh, that's cool. Like, what does he have in those, you know, like what cards can I get with him in an A's and Blue Jays uniform? Granted, I prefer to see him in an A's uniform over the Blue Jays. Blue Jays, their uniform's kind of boring to me, but whatever. You know, if it's something I need, I'll grab it. And I don't really think about it. I don't really think like, well, it's not White Sox. So this is kind of like new to me over the last couple of years. People saying I only collect Frank Thomas when he's on the Chicago White Sox. I only collect King Griffey Jr. when he's wearing
the
Mariners outfit. And I'm like, it's just, there's so much good stuff that came out in the product when he was with the Reds. There's so many cool pieces, that like 2000 and post stuff. And so people just pass it up. I'm like, dude, there's like Donruss Elite Aspirations. There's so many different cool inserts that came out during that time, like gold refractors and whatever else. And so And this stuff doesn't sell well because he's in a Reds uniform. It's really
Yep.
interesting. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, the market for the different uniforms is very odd to me. Although I totally get it, because guess what genius started getting into the hobby when Ken Griffey Jr. was traded to the Reds? This guy.
That was you.
So I have I have so much stuff of Griffey on the Reds, good stuff and bad stuff.
Mhm.
And I've just decided to hold on to it because I've looked at the market for the past, gosh, like almost 10 years, and
Yeah.
I've seen stuff on eBay,
Yeah.
and the red stuff just doesn't sell. And
Just
I
harder,
could
man.
see if Harper goes to a small market team, I could see sort of the same thing happening.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly, I'll still enjoy him as a ball player regardless of where he ends up. Like, I honestly personally don't care. I'll still enjoy, seeing his cards in wherever I'm going through cards. Like, I'll still enjoy reading about his performance, and that kind of thing doesn't bother me. I'm cool. Like, whatever's best for the guy.
Right.
He just moving on a little bit. He coined the phrase "make baseball fun again," which was about players, being able to inspire fans and future stars by showing more on-field enthusiasm, like being excited about playing. I think it's really good to be positive and to be enthusiastic about whatever it is you're doing. Like in baseball, these guys are on contracts. They're expected to perform, but they should. Growing up, that whole thing was like, just go out there and have fun. On the little league or the parents, this is the kind of stuff that parents say to their kids is like, just go out there and have fun. Don't worry about it. And that's the encouragement that Bryce Harper, I think, created when he created this slogan, this phrase, "make baseball fun again." I thought that was a really cool thing to think about, that he's really passionate about baseball and he wants other people to be passionate about it too.
Yeah, I think Harper sort of represents like a new crop of players that are coming out. Harper's still really young. I think people forget that. Maybe it's because he looks a little older, or it's because he started playing when he was like 18, but he's still really young, and I think he represents the sort of new wave of young players that are sort of going against like these quote unquote unwritten rules of baseball, which is sort of like an old timey thing. And, like, for example, like if you hit a home run, you don't watch it go out of the park. You just round the bases. And if you watch it go out of the park, it's like considered a slight to the pitcher. But we're seeing that more and more, and the pitchers don't care anymore. And it's like I said, it's just like one of these unwritten rules that are sort of becoming erased. And Harper is one of those guys that's helping do that. And it's fun to see him. I think some people might construe him as kind of cocky and arrogant, but he's out there, like you said, he's just having fun. And it's nice to see guys like that are very passionate about the game. They sort of lay it all out there on the field. If he strikes out, he'll slam his helmet down on the plate. These sort of classic things. And he's, like I said, like, you could argue his offensive numbers maybe not what you would want them to be, but from a face of the franchise point of view, I mean, he is like the ultimate face of the franchise, just because the way he carries himself on the field.
Right.
It's so fun to watch. He puts butts in the seats like nobody else in the game.
So a couple points here. You mentioned guys watching their ball get launched into the stands before they start running the bases.
Yeah.
In football, there's that whole showboating thing that they banned for a while.
They banned it. Yeah, you can't do it.
But I think in recent times, they've like loosened up on that just a touch. You don't see like cutesy dancing happening at, on the touchdown line, but you might see some, colorful, small version of that happen. And honestly, I don't really care about any of that. All I care about is like whether or not they're performing and making the numbers.
Yeah.
I don't care if the guy's angry or slams his helmet down. All that stuff to me is just more entertainment value for the fans.
Absolutely.
More stuff to talk about. So none of that stuff bothers me. You want to showboat. Just don't take up 10 minutes of our time. Showboat for 10 seconds and get on with it.
Yes.
Slam your helmet down, run back in to the dugout and be done with it. Just don't waste time. That's all I ask. Don't waste my time because the games are already 3.5 hours or whatever. You know, I don't want to see like the ump screaming at a manager for 20 minutes. You know, I don't know if you remember back in, I think it was 2012 when Zach Greinke, maybe it was 2014. There was that big brawl at Dodger Stadium. Like,
oh yeah,
a couple of guys got hurt during the thing, and I think that was like all these players were involved, and a couple of guys got hurt, and I think that's when Zach Greinke was injured for a small bit, and his rookie cards were at that time very affordable, and then he came back up and he's dominant again. But whatever the case is, that's the kind of stuff that's interesting when these kind of like serendipitous moments happen in baseball that are so completely out of the scope of the bell curve of events, that you're like, oh my, a mob that happened between the two teams on a baseball field. Like that's that's something you talk about with your friends. Like, oh, how was the game? It was amazing. There was a mob that was on the field. Like, oh, it's great. What else happened? Doesn't really matter. There was a mob on the field. So it's like kind of fun to talk about those things. I don't encourage them because it's never good to see violence. I think it's, I don't really want to see that. It's just when it happens, you have to it's hard to look away.
Exactly. Like you don't want to see anybody get hurt, but it's fun to see a brawl, especially on a baseball field, because they're usually just kind of like shouting matches.
Right.
But I remember a couple nights ago, I was on like the MLB YouTube channel. I was looking at all the videos and I sorted by most viewed.
Oh yeah.
And most of the videos have nothing to do with baseball. Like they happen to be during a baseball game, but they're either fan interactions or they are fights. And that's sort of what people want to see. And like I said, Bryce Harper kind of guys, I mean, they're just energetic and they kind of do what they feel. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's fun to watch him. Whether you like him or not, I mean, he's a fun player to watch.
So I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of Bryce Harper. I think he's awesome. He's fantastic. Yeah, and he's interesting, and he's got a great personality, and he's charismatic. Yeah, so he's got a little temper. Don't we all? I mean, seriously? Like every now and then? I mean, whatever. So I'm a big fan of Bryce Harper. I think he's fantastic, and I really like that he coined this phrase because it shows a lot of his character. He wants other people to be excited about baseball, too. I like that. And, going back to the brawl thing and the videos that get the highest amount of hits, when I was in business school, I wrote a paper on consumer behavior and how customers are attracted to businesses that provide a novel behavior on each interaction. And when I go to a baseball game, I expect to see baseball. I don't expect to see brawls. So when they happen, it's like, oh my gosh, that happened. Or like, a fan interacts with the game and reaches over and catches a ball that actually one of the opposing team's players should have caught, and that turns into like this controversy where they eject the fan from the game or whatever. Like these situations you don't expect turn into the most interesting things that happen in baseball. Right. So it's not surprising to me that those videos that get the highest amount of hits are those which provide the most unique types of situations that take place in baseball. So cool stuff, man. I'm glad we got to talk about that. I like that we were able to cover a little bit of Bryce Harper tonight. I think he's on his way, and I look forward to seeing what happens next year.
It's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge.
If you don't like him, avoid ESPN or any other major sports outlet because that's all they're going to be talking about throughout the winter.
Right? So fun. Moving on. I don't know if you read about this or heard about this, but in 2018, MLB attendance is down by 6.5% compared to last season.
Oh, interesting. So, I had always been told that it was sort of on the up and up, but this is kind of news to me.
Sure. So now, okay, fans are drawn to games to see exciting plays, as we kind of, sort of touched on that in the previous point, which is why competitive teams draw strong attendance numbers, like, guys like Aaron Judge and Stanton and Bellinger and Ohtani. I mean, teams that have Trout, teams that have these players that are extravagant in talent. People want to go see that,
right.
People want to go see a 2-time MVP or a multi-time consistent all-star. They want to go see crazy performances and home runs and strikeouts and everything else. And so teams that don't have those talents are at risk of drawing low attendance numbers. We talked about the Pirates earlier in this podcast, and because they don't have Cole or McCutcheon anymore, who do they have now? And who do fans look forward to seeing? This is kind of a question I sometimes think. We always have new prospects coming up. We always have new guys coming in, but who do they have right now? It's a veteran that without looking that can draw attendance numbers, because ticket sales are the most important thing, right? It's not so much the numbers who actually attend the game, it's the amount of tickets that are sold. It's like, hey, I'm going to sell you 5 tickets. Do I care if you attended the game? Well, it'd be nice, but I don't really care after you buy the tickets. All we really care is getting your money.
Right.
That's kind of the thing here. Of course, it's rare that you find people buying tickets and then not going to games. I once sold tickets to a show my band was playing at a venue to some friends who actually ended up not going after they bought the tickets. I'm like, geez, thanks, guys. You guys spent $20 or $30 on something you never got any value from.
But the venue doesn't care.
And honestly, the venue doesn't care. They just want to sell the tickets. And so I was actually still kind of put off by that back then. I was like, distasteful. Like, you want to buy tickets to see my band and you don't go. Like, that's upsetting. But if you do, and going back to this, is if your team does well, you draw numbers. And if your team doesn't do well, you don't draw numbers, or you don't draw the numbers that you want. Sports, it's like the fickle nature of sports, right? Like, they love you when you're doing well, and they hate you when you're not doing well. And that's
right.
That's the hardest thing to accept in life, is that the reality of a lot of situations. They love you when you're in this, doing this, but they don't care about you when you're not doing that.
Yeah.
And so it's, interesting to think about that. So the biggest thing you can do as an owner or manager is to try to do everything you can to scout and procure quality talent to join your team, so that you can draw those numbers, those audience numbers, right? The other piece of that is just lower ticket prices by $1 or whatever, some nominal change. But if you lower ticket prices, that might allow for a wider reach of people that are, they can actually fork over whatever fee it is to, maybe it is like, oh, if it was only $1-2 less, I could probably afford it. Granted with baseball tickets, probably want to lower them some larger percentage than $1 or $2, but you get the idea, is that, like, if you lower the price slightly, you can correct some of that a little bit.
Well, in baseball, it's interesting because there's been a huge trend starting back in like the late 90s with Camden Yards and Busch Stadium in St. Louis, is that the ballparks now are built to be a little more intimate. So instead of holding 50,000 people, they hold like 35,000 people. And because of that, the tickets are more expensive, but it's a better experience for the fans. They can afford to go because you're a little closer to the action. It's a more intimate experience. And that's been a trend. I mean, we've seen so many old cavernous ballparks torn down and rebuilt.
Right.
Houston and in Arlington and for the Rangers. There's, San Diego for the Padres. There's a lot of examples, but like you said, it's just sort of, if you don't have a good team, like, who cares what your ballpark is like? I'm not going to pay, $80 to go sit up in the nosebleeds. Even if it is in a smaller stadium, it's not a good product to go watch. So why do I care? And on the other side of things, as an Angels fan, the Angels tickets have always been very affordable. And that's one thing I'll give our owner credit for, is that he's always made the beer prices and the food prices and the ticket prices very affordable. And we have one of the oldest stadiums in the MLB. So if you sit up in the nosebleeds, it's not a great experience. Mm-hmm. But you can still afford it. You can still pay, $30 for a ticket and have like an okay seat. Whereas $30, I'd say in half the stadiums in the MLB wouldn't even get you in the stadium.
Oh, wow.
So it's interesting. I think different owners and different management teams have their different styles. But I don't really know what's going to get the attendance up overall in the MLB. I think that the different sports, like the NFL, has a lot of problems socially and politically. I mean, a lot of different things going on there. NBA has like an odd parity problem where there's the same two teams in the championships every year. And so I think the MLB has a lot of things going for it. If you break it down by team situation, it's hard to say what each team could do to improve attendance. But I am surprised to see that 6.5%, because I always thought that it was sort of on the up and up.
Yeah, I mean, the only two things I can think of, and based on my research, is that, quality talent and ticket sales are going to factor into people's allowance to go to a game.
Right.
And if concessions are really high, and they usually are, I mean, they're not, in my experience, they're comparable to concession prices at the movie theater, which are ridiculous.
Yeah, movie theater, concert, anything where you're trapped and you have to buy food or drink.
Right, but
it's going to be expensive.
I will say that the smart baseball teams have discount night, like it's $1, Dodger Dog night or whatever. And so in those instances, those marketing strategies can help draw crowds, because who doesn't want $1 hot dog? Like that's so much cheaper than their normal multi-dollar price tag for those hot dogs. And so if the teams allow themselves to do more of the marketing and the concessions and the ticket prices and the bundle packs, and then also in addition to trying to acquire the best players they can with the budget that they have, I think that'll help. But so this is, it's kind of surprising, 6.5. But if you look at 6.5 of a 30 and 40,000 yield stadium, it's really a small number.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if you'd notice it. I mean, it's tiny, but good stuff. Moving on. On 6/16 this past Saturday.
Yeah, Father's Day weekend.
Right. Before the Dodgers played the Giants, a game in which they won 3-1, the cast of The Sandlot that reunited at Dodger Stadium for their 25th anniversary of the film's release. And after
Makes me feel old.
I know. And after the game, they showed the film on the Dodger Stadium screens for fans to watch, which I thought was very tasteful.
That's awesome.
I would have loved to have been there. I think that's just so cool that they all came. That movie's a very important staple of my youth.
Oh, definitely.
And I still to this day enjoy watching it, even though I'm, quite a bit older than I was in 93 when it came out. But it's one of my favorite baseball movies, and I thought that was just really, really cool that happened, that they all came together. And, they're grown men like you and I, and so one of the guys, Ham, he looks just the same as he ever did in the movie. Yeah,
that's so funny. He looks exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
He's like a little bigger, but his hair is the same, his face is the same, his body is the same. It's hilarious. And no, it's an amazing movie. It's one of those movies that I could just watch over and over and never get tired of.
Never get tired of it. When I worked at the baseball card shop in Buena Park in 2010, one of the patrons came in and asked if we had any Benny Rodriguez rookie cards. And I was like,
was he serious?
Yeah. And I was like, he's a figment of an imagination of a producer on a movie. It doesn't exist in baseball cards. Sorry.
There might be some fake baseball card out there, but
like the natural with Robert Redford, to commemorate the movie, they produced a baseball card of Robert Redford as Roy Hobbs, his character in The Natural.
Oh yeah, sure.
You can still get those. They made it. They're available. Also with
Major League, right? Didn't they make baseball cards for
Topps
Major League?
Topps has been capitalizing on the casts of certain baseball movies.
Yeah.
Bull Durham was one that they recently did. But, got to remember that you can find Kevin Costner on, some stuff when Bull Durham came out. I want to say Star produced it. I can't remember, but whatever the case is, you can find a Kevin Costner baseball card, of him, in his uniform and everything, which I think is really tasteful. A friend of mine has, I want to say, the original bat that was used in Field of Dreams in the stadium that he built. and he had those bats and those like he was,
Right.
they were using. He has one of those signed by Kevin Costner, one of the actual bats that was used in that movie for that scene. I just thought that's so cool.
That's pretty cool.
Super cool. So, gosh, we're way off topic with this. What were we going with this? The baseball cards for the Sandlot.
The Sandlot.
It wouldn't surprise me if Topps or somebody produced, probably Topps. I can't imagine another company be able to get the license and the permission rights to do that. To create the cards for, if they haven't already, maybe
Right.
I'm missing something, but those are it's really, like I said, it's a very important part of my past and my history and the sport of baseball and baseball cards. I remember the scene in the movie that I love is the scene where Babe Ruth knocks on the Benny Rodriguez's closet door, and out comes Babe
Yeah,
Ruth,
the
and
ghost.
he talks the ghost, and
Yeah.
and he's talking to him, and then he looks at Hank Aaron's rookie card. He's like, Hank Aaron, I don't know why, but can I have this? And he's like, yeah, sure. And it's like in a top loader in one of those like framed screw downs that used
Yeah.
to be popular in the 90s. And I was like, man, that's so cool. He has the 54 Topps Hank Aaron rookie card. Like that was a
Yeah,
scene I
just-
always looked forward to because it featured baseball cards and thought that was so cool. So rad. But
No, on a similar note, I always thought, because that movie was supposed to take place like in the early 60s?
62.
Yeah, okay. So a Babe Ruth autographed baseball in 62, like what is that worth? And then also the ball that he ends up with at the end from the guy that lives beyond the
Darth
baseball
Vader.
field. Yeah, for Darth Vader. Darth Vader's baseball collection. He gives him a ball signed by some of the 50s Yankees, including or not the 50s,
I thought it was
the
the
20s.
27. The 27 Yankees, the Murderers
Yeah,
Row, that
27.
one.
Yeah, so it was Babe Ruth and like a bunch of other Murderers Row kind of players, and I always wondered like how much was that ball worth in 1962?
A cool 100.
Obviously, it's worth a ton now, but yeah, exactly. I was like, is it really? I mean, that was such a weird time to be into like sports memorabilia because it was all sort of fresh in your mind.
I mean, you're touching on something most of us try to avoid. That you're touching on the
Missed
modern, right? The modern take on collectibles industry that took place in the early '60s, that may not have actually even taken place.
Yeah, who knows? But still,
Like the reason why a
it's-
Babe Ruth baseball signed today is worth so much is because people didn't handle them much back in the day, and it's hard to find ones that are in good shape. I mean, just saying like the vintage baseball cards thing. The reason why they're so
same
rare
thing.
is because they're trashed 90% of the time. So
Yep, they were
That's-
toys essentially.
that's a good thing to think about, though. That's a good observation that how much was a 54 Topps Aaron worth in 62. And I didn't know they had top loaders back then. Like I didn't know they had screw downs back in 62. So there are these like hiccups that
Yeah.
if you look at the film and you can pull them out. And I
Yeah, we'll
think,
forgive him. No.
I think some of us who watched that movie are probably crying inside a little bit hearing this because they're
Yes.
like, you're so true.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great movie.
Yeah, there
regardless.
are a few movies that involve sports collectibles, baseball cards or whatever that are just very cringy to someone like me who collects, and it's like, oh my god,
Well, I mean,
that card is worth so much money, or that ball is worth so much money, or whatever.
well, there was some baseball themed, scenes in Little Big League. And that came out in the 93, 94.
In early 90s. So that was like at the height of the hobby in terms of.
Well, that was like in the middle of the boom. So that was 94. Little Big League that came out in 94, and that had a couple of scenes that were themed around baseball cards. I thought that was cool. He's like sitting in bed holding up a 1993 score of the player that he's about to can. He's like, man, I really would like this guy to be better so I don't have to can him. And he's like, well, sorry, I got to can you. The guy gets really upset, and then he hires him later to be a hitting coach. It's so interesting that people are hired in to be hitting coaches when the very reason they were fired is because they couldn't hit. So it's like
They couldn't hit.
You couldn't
They
hit.
can coach, apparently.
You can.
I don't
You
get
couldn't
it.
hit, but I'm gonna hire you to train other people that can hit. It's like so weird
Right.
to me. Anyway, good stuff. I thought that was cool. I would have loved to have been there and seen that, but whatever. Life happens. Moving on. Topps' exclusive licenses have been renewed to well past 2020.
Right.
So we talked about this in a previous podcast that if companies monopolize, they have no reason to innovate because they don't have competitors, right? But competition is really important for business because it gives customers choice. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so what this means to collectors is that they're going to see just, I guess, more of the same. But Topps has actually
More
done
of the same.
more of the same. Topps has actually done really well with their Topps Now and their living set
Yeah.
stuff. And I think that they're very innovative in those capacities. So I like to see more of that happen in the future, even though they own the licenses. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There is the argument that if this were in any other market, Topps would be sued for violating antitrust laws. But I don't think that would be the case now. That was maybe the case in 1980 before Fleer and Donruss entered the market because there weren't other competitors. But we already have other competitors. They just don't have the licenses. So customers still have a choice. So in that capacity, they're not in fact violating any antitrust laws at all because customer choice isn't the issue here. It's these other companies don't have the MLB and MLBPA licensing, which honestly, sometimes I think like collectors should stop whining about that and just to collect for the pure enjoyment of collecting, enjoying. Like seriously, flat out, I sometimes think that because I actually like seeing Panini and Upper Deck and Leaf do all their own unique things, and they do well in certain things that they do.
Mm-hmm.
Like Panini does really well with the FIFA World Cup stickers.
Yeah.
Right? They do exceedingly
Definitely.
well in that category.
Upper Deck does great in hockey.
They do great with hockey.
I mean, that's like their sort of bread and butter. I don't think, does Topps even touch hockey that much? I don't even know.
Whatever the case, Upper Deck does it really well.
Yeah, that's like their thing.
I want to say that Upper Deck has the exclusive license. So I don't think Topps can produce any hockey presently. Leaf produces amazing products even though they don't have the licensing. I mean, sometimes I feel like collectors should ease off the whole like I got to see team logos and team names to be happy kind of thing. Like, dude, you have choices. Don't buy it if you don't like it. Like, buy something else. Like, whatever. And you can still have great baseball cards, even though that those things aren't added in. It's like flair. Like, it's nice to have it, but you don't absolutely have to have it to enjoy something. Collectors make a bigger deal about it than they should. Do I think other companies should have those licenses too? Yeah, absolutely. I do. I don't like the fact that Topps has that exclusivity. I honestly feel like Topps, MLB, and MLBPA all need to get together and discuss how it happened to where only Topps gets the licenses. Why is MLB and MLBPA, why can't they provide those licenses to other companies? That's what I want to know. Like, why is it that did Topps pay MLB and MLBPA massive amount of money to say only us and nobody else?
Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised.
So I don't really know why that happens. I just know that we're looking at the same situation as it exists presently into the indefinite future. We don't know when it's going to end.
My observation is and you have a better marketing background than I do, but my observation is that MLB as an entity has been very aggressive over the past 6-7 years with social media, internet content, things geared more towards the younger viewer. And so has Topps. I think Topps has been also very aggressive on the online market. So if your only conduit for sports cards is Topps, it makes it a lot easier to get your brand and your message across if you're only working with one company. And I think they've done a really good job. I think that Topps has been like surprisingly amazing over the past several years, where they could have just sort of sat back and produced the same old crap. They've actually been kind of fun to follow, and they produce some interesting products. So that's what I would think, I mean, like if you're going to give your only license to a sports cards company, it's got to be Topps. I mean,
Well, okay, so these are interesting things to talk about. First of all, I don't think that Topps having the license is gonna create some sense of lack of innovation. I don't think that. I don't think that. Here's why. Upper Deck, Panini, and Leaf. Okay, customers have options. Like, we have choice. We can buy Topps. We can buy, cards from one of the other three players in the market. But whatever the case, is that customers have options. It's not a question of options. It's just a question of like, do these options have what I want them to have?
right.
And if that's the case, like, dude, nothing's perfect, okay? There's no perfect solution. There's no perfect situation that, like the past existed and it's so great because it's in the past. Like the 90s were awesome because of tons of product, tons of brands, and the categories were, vertical in a large way and they're horizontal like in a big way too. There's just a lot of choice. Now there's still a lot of choice, but the choices are produced by 4 different brands, but each of the 4 different brands produce a lot of different options every year.
Sure.
And so it's not a question of options. It's not a question of choice. It's a question of consumer preference when it comes down to like, oh, I'd rather see the logos and team names. I get that. I like that too. But dang it, Panini has produced some amazing stuff over the years.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
and they're still selling.
Those are amazing cards. I don't care what anybody says. Those cards look fantastic. Do they have the logos and team names? No, but do I care? No.
Yeah, and
I
a
don't
lot
look-
of people don't care because they're still selling very well.
I don't buy cards because they have the team logos. If I did, I'd have a very much smaller Frank Thomas collection. And I buy cards for what they look like. Oh, that's a cool looking card. I think I'll grab that. Sometimes I only pay attention that it doesn't have a logo on it. Doesn't have a team name. It's kind of like when we talked about this earlier in the podcast that if a player gets moved over to another team and they lose some of their audience because of that,
Right.
when I see it, I don't even pay attention. I'm just like, I need this Thomas. And it's a great price. And I don't pay attention. I was like, I know he's in the A's and Blue Jays, but I don't think about it. I don't add that into my decision-making process. Like whether or not the card has or doesn't have team names and logos, I don't add that into my decision-making process. What I look for is rarity and cost and whether or not I can afford it. Like, okay, will it fit in my collection? And I know I stopped buying modern, but there's some things like, depending on the price, I might grab it. These are the kinds of things I look at. Like, and then some things I'm like, oh, this is a really nice card. This is a really nice run of cards. These cards are beautiful. I'll see if I can grab one of those just to have. So,
Right.
but I'm talking about this from my perspective, and I get that there are collectors that don't like that Panini and Leaf and Upper Deck don't have the MLB and MLBPA license, and everybody's got to do what they got to do. I just think that it's not a question of choice here though, because customers always have choices. So I just want to touch on that. I think that it's important to talk about this because I know that the hobby's there's gonna be some blogging about this, and there's it's gonna be breaking news for the next little while, and then it'll calm down. And
Yeah.
people will get on with their lives about it. But it's not a question of violating any antitrust laws. I don't think because customer options exist. This might have been the case in 1980 before Fleer and Donruss entered, which is why Fleer and Donruss entered. Topps is doing a great job, as are the other companies. We don't see Upper Deck in baseball anymore, but Upper Deck they capture another category of collectors, and that's important.
Absolutely. I think if Upper Deck was really bent on getting into the baseball market, I think they would prove themselves to the MLB. And it's obvious that hasn't happened. I do remember the heyday of the late 90s, early 2000s of all these different companies and brands getting involved in the hobby. And it was great. But there was also a lot. I mean, it was like oversaturation of these weird new ideas with varying prices and weird products. And you would walk into a hobby store and look in the baseball section, and there could be like 20 different products going on.
Right.
And it's like, all right, so what do I buy? What has value? What could I get out of this product? And especially if you're a younger collector, if you don't really have a lot of money to throw around, it's a lot nicer just to walk into a hobby store, or walk into a Walmart or a Target, and say, all right, 2018 Bowman, done, or 2018 Topps Heritage,
Right.
done. Like that's the product that I want. Where I mean, like I said, back in the 90s, early 2000s, it was a really fun time for collecting because there was some really interesting ideas being thrown around.
Right.
But a lot of those ideas haven't lasted into the current day. Like we still sort of see the classic, refractor, chrome products, autograph, game used, like these basic tenets of cards. And I think you don't want to really confuse the consumer too much with all these random new ideas just to try and be different. So like you said, I think Topps is doing a good job, and it's nice to be able to walk into a store and sort of see like a singular product from MLB and know what's going to be offered in that product.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and I talk about this in my book, is that too much choice is a problem. It can be a problem.
Right.
Too many options is paralyzing. If I see 5 options, I can, in my peripheral, my line of sight, I can see 5.
Mm-hmm.
If I go into a shop and I see 20 and I have to move my head to see everything, like left to right, top to bottom, maybe, I'm like, God, I'm out of here.
Too much.
That's too much. Like I don't want to spend all this time choosing. I just want to have a small number of options and be done with it. I honestly think that there are still too many products, but they're just nowhere near the amount of products that were, say, in like 2004, when,
Right.
I mean, the amount of products that came out in 2004 is, I don't think had been matched before that, and I don't think has been matched since. I
think you're right.
Huge how the landscape availability for what was produced in 2004 was just it's monolithic. I mean, it's too much. Now it seems like every time I turn around, every 2 weeks there's something new. I still kind of think that's too many. So for me, I try to pick like 1 or 2 and be like, okay, I like these. Like back when I was doing modern runs of Frank Thomas a couple of years ago, I'd pick like 2 or 3 sets and just focus on getting the singles for those. And Thomas is featured in so much stuff that I have to just pick a small number of them because time and money. Like I'd have to sit in front of eBay every day for like 8 hours to get everything. It's just, I got other things I got to take care of in my life. Like I don't have that luxury. If there were a clone of me, I'd be like, all right, this is the clone of Patrick that just sits in front of eBay and beds on stuff for me. I always thought it'd be interesting is that if I have a situation where I'm completely, secure, I would hire somebody to look for cards on me for eBay, and then they'd make a percentage of the amount of money they spent to give them incentive to get stuff for me. That's kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Personal assistant.
Yeah.
Cards.
Well, I have a VA, but I thought it'd be interesting to get someone locally back. All right, your job is to find these cards. Here's my login for my eBay. Here's my login for my PayPal. Here's an NDA you have to sign. Here's a contract. You're bonded. So I would set it up to where I didn't have to do it myself. I would automate the process in some way. But that's just the way I think. But going back to it here is that I'm not really worried that Topps has the exclusive license yet again. Yes, it would be nice to see other companies have that license too. But that it's not the case is not going to put any dent in my passion for the hobby. Zero.
No.
I will still go and buy cards from these other companies if I like them and, if it sounds right to me. So, anyway, I thought we'd touch on that. It's kind of an interesting point. Moving on. Topps and Adidas partnered to bring us a stylish run of baseball card-inspired cleats and trainers. 3 unique styles exist, each featuring a chromed-out refractor-like finish and baseball stats wrapped around the shoe.
So
really cool. So cool. Prices range from $110 to $140. I just think that is so rad. I mean, I've seen the images of the shoes. If you Google search them, you can find them yourself. They look like baseball cards. They're awesome. They're so rad. I think that's such a cool concept. The refractor finish on these shoes is just very Back to the Future.
They're pretty cool. I generally try and avoid corporate sort of logos in any clothing I wear. But I got to say, when I first heard about this and I started checking out the shoes, I was like, that's pretty cool. I mean, it'd be fun to have shoes that said Tops on them for whatever reason. I don't know why, but it's it's just they look fun, and I think it's really smart of Tops to sort of get into that game because sneakers are so popular right now.
Mm.
And it's like, why not? I mean, if Adidas is okay with it, throw a Tops logo on there.
Well, I would like to at least assume that there's some, ultra limited print run on these, because I can't imagine that they're going to.
Oh yeah.
I can't imagine that this is going to be an ongoing thing. But I do like the co-branding concept. I always have, because it gives two brands an opportunity to meet new markets, to reach new markets. People that are fans of Adidas get exposed to Tops. People that are fans of Tops get exposed to Adidas. And so I think that's a really cool concept. And yes, to your point that like the sneakerhead industry is very, very popular right now. And so this is a perfect addendum to that that allows both companies to capture sort of their footprint in the industry, in the market, in the category. So that's really cool. I really like these shoes. I'm not going to buy them myself. It's not really my thing. I just like them. I think they're cool looking.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm definitely leaning towards not buying them. There is a part of me that wants to buy some, especially like the basic trainers from Adidas are like $110, which isn't insane for a pair of athletic shoes these days.
Right.
But the question is, if I buy these, do I wear them?
No.
Or do I leave them in the box and just like
you
sit
put them
on
in a box and
years?
put them in the closet, like all the other shoes that you end up buying that aren't shoes you would wear. See, the question that I have is like, would this be a good investment to buy them and then like in 10 years be like, dude, I got the Tops and Adidas shoes. Oh my gosh, you got the Tops and Adidas shoes. Those are amazing. How much you want for them? $1,000. Like I don't know what because when I don't know if you remember the Back to the Future shoe, that like the high top sneaker from the second movie.
Yeah.
That was brought back, and it was like hugely popular like a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think about like, as a temporary retainer, do I buy this, hold on to it, let it appreciate in value, and flip it in 10 years? That's the only reason why I would ever purchase these shoes, just to have a mint condition. Like, oh my gosh, 10 years, like, yeah, they're now nobody has them. They're impossible to find. But sneakerheads are hopefully it's going to capture the sneakerhead category, even though it's a baseball card inspired thing. Surely there are guys that collect sneakers that are, at one point or currently collect baseball cards. Yeah, right. I know at least one of them, and so this is kind of the angle that I take, is like, do I buy them to sell them later down the line? Like, I wouldn't have any problem selling them. Like, I'm not married to the shoes thing. I don't really do the shoe thing myself. I buy my skate shoes, and I buy my walk around shoes in the winter, and then I have sandals, and then I have my workout shoes. And then I have my indoor shoes when it gets cold out. Like, that's pretty much where the conversation ends with me. They're very utilitarian. I buy shoes for utility. But with something like this, I'd look at it as an investment. Like, how can I flip it around in a couple of years? So, cool stuff. I like that this was created. Really cool shoes. If you haven't seen the photos yet, hop on Google and check them out. Really cool stuff. Really dig those. Those are awesome. Moving on. A 7-year-old boy bought a bag of baseball cards at Goodwill in Apple Valley, Minnesota, and found a small packet of clear rocks.
Uh-oh.
Immediately thought it was meth, right?
Yeah.
So after the police investigated, it was confirmed they weren't drugs of any kind, but believed to be moisture-resistant silica.
Oh, interesting.
But come on, inspect the stuff you give away, please.
Oh,
okay?
Definitely.
And then inspect before you buy it, all right? So I just inspect before you give away. Whoever gets it, inspect it before you sell it. And whoever buys it, inspect it before you buy it. Like, there's an operation here. This lasted all the way to step 3, So, like, the question that I think is, like, is somebody going to get fired at Goodwill for not inspecting? Like, that's the inspection guy. Is like, well, I was tired that day. I had an all-nighter doing inspecting for, like, 2 a.m. and I had to come in the next one. It's like, do I... do I think about that? Like somebody getting fired and through the process, that shouldn't have happened, But really dubious that took place, and I would be scared too. Like, great, I bought drugs accidentally.
Yeah,
It's just what I need.
no, I've heard a few. I have a few friends that have purchased jackets from Goodwill or pants, like things that have deep pockets,
Yeah.
and they found anything from like $20 to like a lighter or to whatever in between.
Right.
And it does sort of make you question, like, what goes on in those collecting rooms? They're just not checking anything?
I mean, you're looking at big city collecting rooms and Goodwills. I don't think they're gonna have time to
They don't have
go
time
through
to do
all
anything.
this
it's
stuff.
like so much quantity.
You're right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can't. In an ideal world, inspection would take place at 3 stages, but we don't live in an ideal world. We never have, and we never will. So this stuff is going to happen, and it's entertaining for reading and for podcasting. That's the way I look at it. I'm just glad it's not drugs and it was silica. But if you look at the picture that's found online for this thing, it looks like it could easily pass as drugs. Because silica is usually in like those packets that say "do not eat, not consumable." But this is like in a little plastic, like 2-section, 2-inch, two sides of a bag that have been stapled together with these like clear rocks inside. It does look like meth. Like, that's how it feels. Like, it's just this, the presentation of it very much leads itself to be seen as potentially being drug related. So I'm glad it's not. And the kid was okay. So happy for that. Good stuff. Good stuff. Moving on. Mariners fan catches pop fly using a hollowed out watermelon during a pregame show where one lucky fan used an inanimate object to catch a ball. In this case, a piece of fruit.
As you do, of course.
Of course. Go to any game, I expect to catch a ball with a piece of fruit. That's like a no-brainer.
Absolutely. I usually go with a cantaloupe, but watermelon works too.
I'm more of a honeydew guy myself, but I appreciate seeing the other melons being used to catch balls. Like, this is pretty standard behavior. You go to a game and catch a ball with a watermelon. That's like run-of-the-mill scenario. Everybody knows this.
I'd be curious to see what the what's his name, Zach Hampel, the foul ball god.
Yeah.
What he thinks about this? What if he was given the challenge of catching a ball with a inanimate object, if he was able to do it or not?
You know what I would choose for him to catch the ball with? Another baseball.
Oh, interesting.
Here's a baseball. What do I do with this? You catch another baseball.
A giant baseball or just a
no, it's a
baseball?
standard normal size baseball.
That would get some hits on his YouTube channel.
So, yeah, this is something fun to think about, right?
That's fun. I mean, there's always clips. It seems like every month there's a clip of somebody catching it in their beer, which I've always wanted to do. I mean, I've always wanted to catch a foul ball. I've never caught a foul ball or a home run. But if you catch it with your beer, I think that's like extra cool. Or like with your nachos, like with some sort of food or beverage, whatever you have in your hand. A watermelon is definitely kind of out there. But leave it to the Mariners to think of that shenanigan.
I think it's really great marketing, though. It's fun.
It is.
And if you look at the concept of a watermelon, like the design of it, if you carve that out, that actually makes for a very nice catching mitt. Because
yes, it does.
It's like it's ovular shaped, and so if you carve out a piece of it, you can have the ball fall into it very orderly, and it would work. And so I actually thought that was kind of cool. It's a fun pregame thing, kind of fun to watch when you're waiting for the game. What a great pregame show activity! Instead of getting T-shirts shot out of high, pulse rifles, essentially, you're getting someone with a watermelon catching a baseball.
Hey, going back to the attendance numbers we were talking about.
Oh yeah,
maybe more teams should be thinking about these
right.
fruit related audience interactions. The more I think about it, I think that a bushel of bananas mostly resembles the shape of a glove in the human hand. So I think that's what I would have gone with in the end.
All right, so what do I catch the ball with? Well, here's a bundle of bananas. And have a good time.
Bananas. You can sort of slide your fingers in there somehow. I don't know.
It'd be even more funny if you gave the guy one banana.
Just one. Yeah, just one.
One.
Sorry. It's a
what
big
what
banana.
Am I catching? No, it's a normal sized banana. What am I catching the ball with? And the guy hands him like this overripe banana with like brown spots on it. Here you go. Moving on though. Birthdays. On 6/12, Hideki Matsui turned 44. And he actually in 2003 was the prospect for the Yankees. He was the guy.
44. And that just sort of goes back to how Japanese players get they get a hard time when they come to MLB because they're already, like in their late 20s. I mean, at the age of 44, if Hideki Matsui was born in America, he would have had a much longer career.
Well, isn't it the case that they have to spend so many years in Japan or wherever they're from before
so
they
that
come
was
over
the
here?
case, like when Ichiro and Matsui, when they were pros in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it was 9 years of service time you
Right.
had to
Yeah.
play in Japan. And because of Shohei Ohtani, I feel like I should know more about this, but there's some sort of loophole where you can come here before that 9-year mark. Which is why Ohtani, I think he's like 23 or 24.
Right.
Whereas, 10 years ago, he might have had to wait until his late 20s to come here. So I'm actually surprised to see that Matsui is only 44 because in my mind, I always thought he was an older player.
Well, he started playing baseball in 1993. And then he didn't come here until
Japan,
10 years later in 2003,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
11 if you count that last year. But so he and Ichiro also, in 93. So if you look at that, you see that, if they were here much earlier on, Ichiro would have beat Pete Rose and his, hits record. And it would be in stone here in the States. I think Matsui, I don't know how he would have performed here if he just came over in 93 and started playing, because we've had a lot of guys come over younger that their careers didn't really amount to too much. But with Matsui, I think he had a pretty decent career despite what I feel is an early retirement.
Yeah, no, he had a great career, and I think with Ichiro or Matsui, I mean, if they would have come over, like in the mid to late 90s as opposed to 2001, 2003, I mean, it would have been a much different picture for both those guys.
Still be the same
in terms
age,
of
though.
Career numbers. Yeah, that's true.
Matsui still be 44.
Yeah, so I mean, happy belated birthday, Mr. Matsui.
So he's a
really fun player. I mean,
Yeah.
he was obviously he was a monster on the Yankees. He played, I think, for a season or two on the Angels, and I loved watching him play.
Mm-hmm.
Just a great guy all around. I think if you think about the top 5 Japanese baseball players to make a name for themselves in America, he's got to be top 5, right?
I also look up to Matsui. I remember in 2003 he was the prospect, and I was just getting back in the hobby, and I was trying to pull his cards, and I did pull a few. He's a role model for Ohtani. In fact, I talked about this before, is that if you look at the batting stance of Hideki Matsui and the batting stance of Shohei Ohtani, you can see a very firm resemblance. They're very similar.
They're both lefties, right?
Yes. And so you can see a very firm resemblance of those two batters, and I thought that was cool. Another cool fact about Matsui, he's a great character. He's got great character. He bought. I think the story was that he bought lunch for the whole PR team when he was coming in, and then they bought him lunch one time, and then he bought them lunch again. And they went back and forth for his career. That he just took care of the guys that were covering him. I think that's right. Don't quote me on that,
awesome.
but I think that from what I remember reading about him, he had a great character in this way. So, happy 44th birthday to Hideki Matsui. On 6/15, Tim Lincecum turned 34. He's had a great career, I think. I look forward to seeing him pitch with, I think, the Rangers this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. The Rangers, signed him to some sort of minor league deal,
Yeah.
and he's obviously not made any major league appearances this year. The Rangers are not the best team this year, so maybe we'll see him at some point if they just sort of want to, see what he's got and call him up and give him a go. But obviously, if you were following baseball last year, Tim Lincecum made a comeback attempt with the Angels, which was not successful at all.
That was in 2016.
Okay, so I mean, either way, so he's tried to make a comeback before,
Right.
and it did not work.
Yeah.
And 34, I mean, I hate to say this, but I guess it's sort of an older age in baseball years. And if you're a pitcher and you're not producing and you're 34, it's a big question mark. Although that being said, I don't want to be negative. He was like one of the most amazing pitchers for a long time.
Yeah.
And I loved watching him pitch for the Giants. His World Series performances and his playoff appearances, I mean, unbelievable. I think they're going to be historic. 100 years from now, when people are looking back on pitching performances, Tim Lincecum is going to be in that conversation for sure.
Back-to-back Cy Young awards in 08 and 09.
Yeah.
And in 08, his win-loss percentage was .783. He won 18 and lost 5. I mean, that's pretty
crazy.
Significant. And so I really liked watching him too. And to his credit, when he only played 9 games with the Angels in 2016, and he lost 6 and won 2.
Yeah, that's why I played 9 games, because he stunk.
But I mean, whatever. It's like the Rangers are giving him a shot, even if it is in their minor league system. He still gets to play some, baseball while he's still. Yeah, I think he's still young, 34, whatever, And so he's already made his money, right? He's already made a name for himself, and so I look forward to seeing him again. And if he doesn't ever produce at the major league level, whatever, he's still pitching in some capacity, and I think that's important.
But he had a few years where he was just so dominant, and like I said, his playoff appearances and his World Series performances were just off the charts. And his windup and his composure, I mean, he's one of the most exciting pitchers to watch that I can think of over the past 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
He's like 5'10" or 5'11". He's not very big, and he's got this funky windup where he really just whips his body around.
Yeah, he does. Really cool stuff.
I assume ultimately led to his injuries, but just a really fun player to watch. And happy birthday, dude.
Hey, man. 34, Tim Lincecum. Good stuff. On 6/16, Wally Joyner turned 56.
Wally World. Wally World.
56 for Mr. Joyner. Now, I remember when I got into the hobby in 1988, he was still considered one of the guys to watch. He came up in 86 with the Angels, and I still, when I see his rookie cards in like 5 and 10 dime boxes, I'm like, I'll grab another one of those. Like, Joyner's he's a part of that old like 80s group where I'm like, that fits really well in my collection because of the story behind Wally Joyner. I went into a shop and they had the Tiffany of his 87 tops in a PSA 10, and I think they wanted like $8 to $10 for it, and I was like, I'll just grab that. I'm good.
Steal.
Yeah. So that's a great card to have. It's got the little like All-Star Rookie Cup logo on it. I think those are really cool. But he has an interesting story with Upper Deck. When Upper Deck was being formed, he was included in a promo set with he and Dwayne Bice, a couple different versions of these cards because they were Angels. Those were the two guys they decided to include into the promo run of cards, which I think was just the 2 cards with he and Joyner, Dwayne Bice and Joyner. But Joyner came up with the Angels, and he was an all-star in '86 when he came up. which is, he had 290 batting average, 22 home runs, 172 hits. That's like pretty significant stuff. He had a pretty solid career. I don't think he's Hall of Fame worthy, but I think that he certainly has his brand cemented into baseball history, and I really like that about Mr. Joyner. And he's certainly a product of my early years in collecting.
Absolutely. I think if you're an Angels fan, Wally Joyner is just sort of part of your lexicon, whether or not you grew up with him or not.
Mm-hmm.
He was like a very charismatic guy,
Mm-hmm.
and he had some great years. Like you said, he didn't really live up to the expectations later in his career, but really fun guy to watch. And I think my favorite trivia about Wally Joyner, which really isn't about Wally Joyner, but it's it's about the Rookie of the Year voting in 1986. So Wally Joyner came in second place.
Yeah.
Do you know who came in first place?
In 86? Jose Canseco.
86. Jose. There you go.
Was that Jose Canseco?
You got it. Jose Canseco was first place Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, so he's that doesn't surprise me whatsoever at all. In no capacity. Jose Canseco getting
obviously.
Rookie of the Year in 1986, makes total sense. Total sense.
But yeah, so Wally Joyner, he definitely would have won if it were not for the behemoth of Jose Canseco.
Right.
So happy birthday, 56 years old, Wally Joyner.
Yeah. In 6/18, Sandy Alomar Jr. turned 52. And now, man, I remember in that 89 that he was one of the big rookies. It was a Griffey, Randy Johnson, John Smoltz, Craig Biggio was a rookie, although the popularity around him hadn't yet buzzed. But Sandy Alomar Jr. was in that group. He was like one of the guys to get in rookie cards. Oh, Gary Sheffield was another one of, like guys to get in the 89 block. And so I remember collecting his 89 Don Russ, his 89 Upper Deck, his 89 Tops. I would file his cards when I'd pull them, like, oh, Sandy Alomar Jr. I mean,
oh yeah,
he was a product of my youth collecting, my early years of collecting, certainly.
Absolutely. I mean, that last name, just because his dad and his brother, like whenever I saw Alomar when I was a kid collecting, and to this day, whenever I see it, I'm just like, all right, set that aside, because that's the baseball family. 52, once again, makes me feel old, but there it is.
Well, he had a 20-year career, and he was actually a Rookie of the Year in 1990. He got that status. There's still a market for his stuff. I've noticed guys collect Sandy Alomar high-end pieces. I don't know if it's because of set builders or what, but his high-end stuff still performs pretty well in the market. So, yeah, happy birthday, Mr. Sandy Alomar Jr. at 52. Good stuff. Today would have been the 26th birthday of Mr. Oscar Taveras. We lost him a couple of 4 years ago. Sadly, he was a huge potential, and it's so sad when guys come up and then we don't see them. Like it's upsetting, right? Yeah. So he would have been 26 today. So young kid. But happy birthday, Mr. Oscar Taveras.
Happy birthday, Oscar. I mean, I still remember waking up to that news. Horrible. It was such a shame.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the way if his accident wouldn't have happened, I mean, St. Louis as a franchise, they were sort of building themselves around this guy. He was such a talent.
Yeah.
And obviously they haven't really been as competitive in recent years. And I think it's because they were sort of betting on him being the sort of future face of the franchise.
Yeah.
And yeah, when he went down, it was just such a bummer because you knew that St. Louis was going to take such a huge hit. And
yeah, it impacted the hobby too. I mean, it impacted the teams, it impacted the families. It's just when people die, so many people are affected by that. And so kind of a sad note to end on in that capacity that today would have been his 26th birthday. But, I just wanted to touch on that because I think that was important to bring up.
Absolutely.
Those are our 5 birthdays for this week. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you for tuning into the Radicards podcast and radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Reno. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us. And until next time, enjoy collecting.
If you like this content, please subscribe. Thank you. Enjoy collecting.